All right, how's everyone doing? Glad everyone. It sounds like I've already been drinking. I haven't even actually had one sip of anything yet, so I got to get these. I got to get the words and stuff figured out. So tonight's going to be fun. So I'm glad, really happy to be doing this. So Jason will probably pop on here in a little bit. We got Nick kind of in the background. We'll bring Nick on here in a couple of seconds, and we'll kind of get going with some things. But what we wanted to do, we don't get this opportunity very often. That when we get picks, a lot of times we're trying to get tasting notes and give those things to you guys before we launch one of our picks. And again, this will be partially for Mash and Journey. And then for others, maybe who are not familiar with Found North, you'll get a good opportunity to hear more from Nick. He can talk a little bit more about the brand. And I mean, I've gushed over them for quite a while now. I mean, they're doing some fantastic things. And sometimes I think they just need others to kind of toot their horn a little bit. So, but they're doing an absolutely incredible job. And for those who have had the privilege of trying some of the stuff that Nick and them do, you guys know fully what I'm talking about. So, but before we kind of bring Nick on, let me just say hi to a few people that were in here right away. Adam was in right away. Kerber, how's it going, buddy? Good to see you. Blind Squirrel, Katie Turk, the boss, good to see you as always. Sugar Katie, good to see you. Nate Cox, good to see you, brother. Hey, Darrell, how's it going? I know you're probably going to be in on this bad boy. How's it going, Ben Draman? How's it going? Kelsey Dime, my man. Tim Gargis. Timmy, how's it going, buddy? Roy, Tim Snyder. My man, Christopher David. Chris, how's it going, bud? My third favorite, Cam Lochner. How's it going, buddy? Adam Shelton, good to see you. Burr Ben, always good to see you, buddy. JG, how's it going? I think we're kind of caught up a little bit. So we'll get going on this stuff a little bit, but I just wanted to kind of, reintroduce a little bit of the brand. And again, this is slightly different than what they've done in the past. They have had their batches. These are now kind of, I'll say single barrel. There's more kind of that goes into that than what that is. There's a lot of different rebarreling, and we'll let Nick kind of talk a little bit more about that. But we'll get going here real quick and just kind of dive into this thing. Have a good, fun night as always. Talk some whiskey, hopefully drink some stuff. And then for Mash and Journey Whiskey Club, you guys will have an opportunity to get these come Friday. So we're really looking forward to that. So, all right, without further ado, let me bring on the man of the hour, Mr. Nick Taylor. How are you, sir?
Oh, man. I just cracked into this single barrel. So I am not doing really well. If I stumble off my words, it's because I have been drinking. No,
okay. Hey, you got an excuse. I have no excuse whatsoever. So
no, thank you so much for having me.
No, thanks for jumping on tonight. I really appreciate it. So I think before we kind of get into it a little bit, and we'll have you kind of share a little bit about Found North before we dive into the whiskey and everything. But what I always like to touch base on with what it is you guys do and kind of the American side of things is just kind of explain a little bit about the process of like blending Canadian whiskey coming off of like 100% mash bills or 100% grain, distillation and all of that. Because I think when we all talk, and this about a mash bill, we're thinking 75% corn and it's literally percentages, but that's slightly different. So maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I love diving into this, and it's one of my favorite parts about working with Canadian whiskey. So basically, when you look at American and Canadian whiskey, they were effectively the same for the beginning of their existence. They were made exactly the same way. Mash bill, right? You were using corn, rye, and a little bit of malted barley. I'm from Massachusetts, so although we often don't talk about that because nobody likes this state, but I'm from Massachusetts, and one really funny sort of whiskey claim to fame is the first written record of effectively the mash bill of combining corn, rye, and barley was a writer, a scientist in Massachusetts, in Boston. Named Mr. Dr. Hall, and he wrote that you should basically do effectively 3/4 corn and 1/4 rye, and then mix in the barley. And the barley is really just there because of the enzymes that are in barley. So basically, barley has an enzyme that's really, really effective at converting starch to sugar. We need sugar to make alcohol, right? You add yeast to sugar, you make beer, you distill beer, you have whiskey. Um, and so that was sort of the original way of making whiskey. And the Canadians were doing it, the Americans were doing it. Okay, great. Early 1900s, the Canadians sort of started, not sort of, the Canadians basically developed ways of cultivating enzymes so that they did not need the barley anymore. Um, they actually still use it a little bit here and there
Hmm.
from a flavor standpoint, but and really actually like it's for the fermentation process. But for the most part, they started doing these 100% whiskeys, these 100% grain whiskeys, these 100% streams. So it was like, all right, we're going to take corn. We don't need the barley. We can just add the enzymes to convert the starch to sugar, and we can ferment, distill, age it. We can do the same with rye. We can do the same with wheat. We can do the same with barley if we want. And then they're doing the blending at the end when they have these sort of complete components. We call them components, right?
Mhm.
So effectively, in the early 1900s, all whiskey that was made was blended. And so it was like, all right, how do we create paints that are going to be on our palate? Let's let the master blender then paint the picture. How do we create the best paint? Let's not create the best sort of finished product right off the bat.
Mhm.
Let's create these different components. Um, and right at the same time, American whiskey was kind of going in the other direction. It was becoming very, very regulated and very restrictive on how it had to be made.
Mhm.
And that was when the sort of styles started to divert a little bit. The idea of kind of straight bourbon didn't really firmly take hold until 80 years later, till 40 years ago, 50 years ago. But that was effectively the big change in how these whiskeys were made. So for us as a company, what we've been looking at is the 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 Canadians have made this whiskey in a way where if you're the blender, you can really dictate to the final flavor. You can really dictate to the final profile. And what they, of course, do is they then blend it and then they water it down, they chill filter it,
Yeah.
and they do all these. And by the way, they also intentionally try to make it lighter in flavor. Um,
Oh.
Not ideal. And it's funny because we make these whiskeys, we love these whiskeys. When we go up to Canada, and we work with the distilleries and the folks at the distilleries, they're like, "Yeah, we like your whiskey. I think we'd like it better at 80, 86
Yeah,
proof or 80 proof."
it's interesting
Uh,
that they like drinking it at a lower proof, I guess. Huh.
Okay, sure,
Yeah.
cool. Um, and so the real idea behind the brand was we've got this whiskey that's actually really lovely, and the Canadians are making it in a very Canadian style, and we want to take it and we want to take these really old, really interesting components and really blend it much more to an American profile.
Yeah.
And I would say that the big difference between us and the American companies that are buying Canadian whiskey, the two differences are one, a lot of times they're not being upfront about the fact that it's Canadian. That's
Mhm.
changed a lot in the last few years, but
Mhm.
you're seeing a lot of these old ryes that, it's like the oldest rye in America distilled
Yeah.
in Alberta. You know what I mean? You're like, okay, well,
Yeah.
that's if
Yeah.
we're talking about the grand North America, then yes, you're right. It is the oldest rye, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
The other thing we're seeing is a lot of the American brands are treating Canadian whiskey like it's MGP. They're going in and they're saying, okay, here's a lot of old rye. Here's a lot being a selection of barrels. Here are a bunch of barrels of old rye. We're going to bottle it and sell it. And it's not that's not how Canadian whiskey's made. It is made where these single sort of distillates are really not complete whiskeys. They need to be blended.
Mhm.
So we live in the space in between. We are Americans making Canadian whiskey. We're making it for our profile, which we think is really attuned to the American whiskey drinker, as in the not like Americans whiskey drinker, but drinkers of American style whiskey, be it
Right.
bourbon and straight rye. Um, but rather than sort of treating this like it's MGP, we're actually blending it. And for us, that's exciting because we have so much control over the final product. So that's us in a nutshell, and the
Yeah.
history of Canadian and American whiskey. How'd
Yeah,
I
it
do?
was. I mean, I've always liked kind of when you do like that explanation, because we just naturally think of it as something completely different, and not coming from blends of the particular grain at 100% blended. So like when we look at this, and I've always said, like, you're looking at this as, like, for ours was 66 rye, 30 corn, 4 barley, but all distilled from 100% grain, just blended to create those percentages.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a cool thing.
Yeah. So I mean, to jump right into the single barrel you got there.
Mhm.
For us, we wanted to. I mean, so I come from working in a liquor store and working for a chain of retailers where I had the privilege of picking a ton of barrels. It was my favorite part of the job. Picking barrels is like the funnest thing you can do in whiskey. I think it is. I think it is so exciting for a bunch of reasons. The reasons I love it are, one, a lot of times the retailers and the clubs are much closer to the consumers than the distillery or the brand is. Um, they're interacting on a day-to-day basis. A lot of times the club members are part of the picking process. It's a great way to actually get the whiskey itself so much closer to the consumer, in terms of what they like, but also in terms of owning the experience and
Yeah.
being a part of it. We
Yeah.
love whiskey as a um I the cheesy thing I always say is, like, whiskey is this big ship and we're all on it. It's
Yeah.
like it's a really
It's a great community. I mean, it's from
great
the standpoint
community.
of, like you mentioned. I think that camaraderie, that everyone's there for a particular goal and to enjoy something, and to kind of enjoy everyone's company. And then also, I think the cool part is everyone tastes things slightly different, so you get the perspective of everyone
Totally.
else. But there's always still those, maybe a handful of components that everyone will pick up, and maybe a couple different ones here and there from everyone. And that's always the cool thing to kind of hear about. But a lot of people, when you're doing these barrel picks, at the end of the day, we all know what we like and what we don't. I mean, that's really what it kind of boils down to. But yeah, the barrel picking process is so much. It's just so much fun. And creating a blend. And I know you and I have talked a little bit about this too, but taking those components and allowing people to create their Found North, is a cool concept too, to create literally like your own blend. I mean, we've all picked barrels, but I think at the end of the day, if you create something literally on your own or with a few other people, I mean, does it get much better than that?
That is in our future.
Yeah,
We are going to do that. That's going to be really fun. I've been working on that. It's really hard because creating blends takes a long time.
I'm
So
sure.
how do you get a group of people together and settle on an actual blend? But
Yeah.
I've been brainstorming on how to do that. But I think for us, in terms of the single barrel itself, we wanted to create. We actually created the blend that then became the single barrel program.
Yeah.
So for those people who are unfamiliar with our single barrels, um, we didn't want to just take a barrel from one of these sort of single streams of whiskey and say,
Mhm.
okay, this is our single barrel program, because it's totally it's totally against what we do as blenders, but it's not optimizing the whiskey at all. The whiskey's made to be blended. So how do you create a single barrel program from blended whiskey?
Yeah.
So of course we what we did was we blended together 50% 12-year-old rye, 20% 19-year-old rye, and 30% 21-year-old corn. We created a blend, and then we recast it into a bunch of barrels and further matured it. So The barrel you guys got was affectionately known to me as FN5, which is just a hilarious just the acronym for that was just
Yeah.
written on the barrel, right? Stenciled onto the barrel as the ID number. But FN5 was one of 18 different barrels that would become our sort of our single barrel program. And the fun thing about doing this blend was we weren't creating a completely finished whiskey. Right. The point wasn't to have, okay, this is a done whiskey and now we're enhancing it. Right. The
Yeah.
point was, let's create a whiskey that for the most part is balanced. It's excellent, but has space for more wood interaction, because
Yeah.
so much of the wood interaction is actually happens in the first several months. So when you rebarrel something, you are adding a ton of wood. So we used components and we created a blend that had space for this further maturation. And goodness gracious, did you guys pick one of my absolute favorite barrels? Like,
Yeah,
holy
this one
cow.
was incredible. If you don't mind, I guess just for, people now and people watching and then people who will be buying the bottles, can we kind of break this down through the process of how this bottle essentially kind of, came to be?
Yes. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So we created the blend and we actually blended it, physically blended it and recast it back in December of last year. So a full year ago. And designing this blend was incredibly difficult. It's much easier to make a whiskey where you say, okay, this thing is done, as opposed to saying, okay, this whiskey is 80% done and needs the last 20% is going to be barrel aging that we really aren't sure how it's going to go.
Mhm.
We picked 18 different barrels. Five of them were actually new wood barrels, different char levels, and just different treatments of the barrel. Yours was a level 3 char. Yours was one of the most delicious barrels
Yeah.
that we made. The other 13 barrels went into a variety of different casks: port, sherry, sauternes. We did an Isla cask. We did all kinds of different things.
Mhm.
We then further matured those barrels all in a warehouse in Dover, New Hampshire. Um,
Okay.
and then what we did was, for the most part, we sent out samples, and when the buyer said, oh, when they started being ready, the interesting thing is when you cask them into all these different barrel types,
Mhm.
they don't behave linearly, right? It's not like, oh, they're all just going like this.
Right.
Some of them did. Some of them were very straightforward, but some of them were all over the place, right? So it's a little tricky to know, okay, this one's ready to pull or this is not. So
Yeah.
when we started getting close where we were saying, okay, these barrels are feeling like they're in a really good spot, we would send the samples out. And if the buyer said, that's the one I like, we'd pull it, put it into plastic, let it sit, and then put it into glass, which is the process.
Yeah.
It's actually a very important process, which I'll talk about in a second. Um, but sometimes, every once in a while, we're tasting them and nobody's bought them yet, and we just say, this one is ready for glass. It's doing something. It's doing something we love, or it's just at the cusp of being too sweet or too oaky or too whatever. We're
Mhm.
done. We want it to go, and then we'd sort of pull it and start selling it. Um, your barrel was your barrel was delicious from day one and just got more and more delicious.
So it's so good. Like I've been sitting here smelling this thing for like ever. Like at some point I'm gonna have to like sip this bad boy because it just, I mean, the nose on this, and again, guys, for me, other than when we did the tasting, I've not tried it. I wanted to kind of be doing this here. And plus when I got it late yesterday, it was really cold. So I wanted to give it some time to just kind of, room temperature. But um it is unbelievably chocolatey. The spice, the sweetness, the deep like brown burnt sugars, all of that stuff. I mean, it's got so much going on. And Nick and I, we were talking about this before we went live. I think Nick may agree, but just even nosing it so far, you would trick, I think, a lot of people into believing that this was just a high rye bourbon of some sort. Maybe not even high rye. I mean, the spice really shows up, but you would convince a lot of people that this was a incredibly rich, dark, deep bourbon.
This is, oh man, this is such a bourbon drinkers. I mean, if you like rye, you're probably gonna like this. But honestly, if you like bourbon, this is just a bourbon drinkers rye. This is the most bourbon drinkers rye thing we've ever made. Honestly, this might be the crowd pleaser for all bourbon drinkers in general of all the stuff Found North has ever made. It drinks like an extraordinarily well balanced bourbon. And you're right, like totally high rye. But
it's so custardy. It's like rich. It's thick. I mean, it's all right. Okay, you talk, which I know is not going to be an issue. I'm going to sip. I want to get this thing. I want to take a sip of this. I got to figure this out because this thing, I can't smell it anymore. I just can't.
Yeah, take your time. Yeah, this is one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite single barrels we made. This is one of my favorite whiskeys we've ever made. I had enormous affection for this. I did not want to sell it. I wanted to sell it through Found North and just have it be a Found North barrel. Because it just.
If I would say also, if you were a cigar guy, this is maybe the perfect cigar whiskey that would hold up to any kind of cigar, I would say. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous.
There's no hey, what's up, man? How are you?
What's up, Mickey? How you doing, buddy?
I'm like 3 pours deep into this barrel of yours, and I'm in love and really glad that I stole one of your guys' bottles before it was labeled.
Yeah, I put a nice little dent in it last night because I cracked it open for the first time, and I'm like, these toasted bourbons always need, or toasted whiskeys in general, always need a little bit of time. Yeah. So I'm really excited to dive back in tonight and see how it's opened up. But I remember it being kind of a maple syrup bomb when I first tried it. It was.
It is. I mean, it's got so much of that spice, and I mean, really, like we were saying before. I mean, you would trick a lot of people into this being a bourbon. I mean, period. Like this tastes like a rich, heavy, viscous, heavy brown sugars. I mean, a lot of that stuff. It's a beautiful whiskey.
It tastes like pancakes.
Oh my God, it does. It's gotten even more like breakfasty. Oh my God,
it's so breakfasty. I mean, it's like thing just drinks like pancakes.
And see, you guys have an advantage because you've already probably got a little bit of air on yours. Like I just opened mine last night. I didn't even try it, didn't do it. I just wanted to open up the bottle just to try to do something. And then because it was too damn cold to do anything with when I got it. But man, that is just a great whiskey right there.
It's also
yeah, go ahead.
Nick, I'm getting like this on the very end after it gets to like the sweet pancake syrup, it gets like molasses on it.
Totally molasses and I get like a little graham cracker note. I get just like this little graham cracker note, which I absolutely love. And the rye spice comes through so much kind of cinnamon, molasses, brown sugar. And I think that's why it's such a deceptive rye, because the rye is really singing a lot of the classic bourbon-y notes. You get that it's like a little too spicy to be a bourbon, but that's why I think it's so hard to. If you blinded me on this and you put it next to a bunch of bourbons and you said one of these is a rye, it would be tough to figure it out.
Yeah, man, this thing, as it's opened up here, this is like a perfect whiskey for this time of year too, because it's so warming and spicy and sweet and rich, and to Nick's point, breakfasty. So Scott, when you upon first trying it, Scott, what were you thinking about it?
Well, we talked a little bit about this kind of off before we went live, and we kind of started talking a little bit about, hopefully you don't care if I bring up another brand that we had mentioned before, but
Go.
we were talking a little bit about how it had slightly a profile of like a birthday bourbon, like an Old Forester, that like rich kind of spicy, kind of the brown sugars like that, like maybe either like you said molasses or something like that. It's got a lot of that kind of characteristic to it. But the nice part was the spice hits you like early, and then it just subtly kind of goes not goes away, but it just kind of sits on your palate, but in a very nice way. So it's got a lot going on.
This is the Pillsbury cinnamon roll thing, like in a glass. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I love that.
And it's, I've said that about whiskeys before, like, oh, it's got a lot of cinnamon and it's kind of cinnamon roll-ish. I could see that, but this is like somebody somehow liquefied a cinnamon roll, put it in a glass. I mean, it's that distinct.
It's got the creamy icing.
That's for sure.
Kicker. It's not just the cinnamon sugar notes. It has viscosity to it. It has oil to it. It has a creaminess to it in the body. I was telling Scott right before we got on here that we almost picked this whiskey to be the first whiskey that we were going to release, the first single barrel. This was almost single barrel one. It was so close to being single barrel one, and the only thing was I found it harder to describe than what we picked as single barrel one. That was the differentiator. We just needed to be able to write about it, and I needed a hook. And the other one was so like it had this one strong note, but this one I think was more balanced. I think is the most balanced whiskey that we've made in terms of just like. I often think about when we're making whiskeys, we talk about having top notes, body, base, basically like the three things, right? It's like it's got to have some of those nice bright notes on top. It needs nice body, which is all of that like sugar, molasses, spice, and it needs base in terms of viscosity and body. And this thing is just like a clean winner across all three phases. It's really delightful. I love this.
So Scott, I don't know if you saw it. Nate Cox in the chat called it as like literally I was thinking it. There's Amburana, like cigar batch finish notes I'm getting in here with that heavy cinnamon, a little bit of like cinnamon apple too to go with the molasses. There is some of that I think in here, but without the Amburana cask, I think maybe I know a couple of people in the chat were asking what's the breakdown of the bottle.
Let's kind of go through that. I know Nick kind of explained it a little bit before. So again, these are all going to be, distilled from starting with 100% grain of each one of these. So for instance, on this blend that was ultimately then barreled amount, 5 million times, I think it was. This has been about 5 million different barrels. So the percentage on this was 66% rye, 30% corn, and 4% barley. So again, those are percentages of 100% distilled grains. So they're just percentages of each one of those 100%. Did I get that right?
Yes, we'll call it yes. You nailed it as far as we can on a live stream. Yes. Okay. And basically those whiskeys were the weird thing about this quote unquote single barrel is those whiskeys were 50% 12-year rye, a 20% 19-year rye, and 30% 21-year corn. The rye had a little bit of barley in it. That's why there's actually a barley component in there. But effectively, those three whiskeys were combined and then rebarreled. This one was a level 3 char new American oak barrel. And it spent, 8 more months in there? When did you guys pick this? In August, something like that?
God, is that when that was?
I think when you pulled the trigger, we pulled it out. So it was 8 or 9 months or something like that.
Yeah, we were going back and forth on which one we liked, Scott, for a few days before we picked it. So there was 2 that was in the mix that were.
You guys had some legit casks. Yeah.
Yeah, the finishes we felt weren't quite there yet. We're like, these need more time. But when it came to the toasted barrels, we're like, okay, a couple more months, these are going to be pretty stellar. And we grabbed the one that had the most. I guess, Scott, what did we say? It had the most.
I think it was
the best outlook, like for us, we thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the one that probably resonated. I mean, I guess when you come from the like that bourbon influence, like a lot of those notes and the richness, the texture of the whiskey, a lot of the balance and all of that really kind of resonated. But with the twist of all of this being a Canadian rye, which was really kind of a cool thing and story. I mean, it just was. And honestly, I'll say this, Jason, I mean, I think this is better now than it was even when we tasted it.
Oh,
I mean,
hands down, hands down. Like, and I'll be honest. I opened this last night, and I first tried it. I was like, what's happening here? Like, what am I getting here? Like, I'm getting a lot of the Canadian influence. I'm getting the rye. Like, I'm looking for the sweetness, and then I think over the course of like 2 hours of just editing last night, I kept going back to it. I'm like, oh man, this is getting better and better and better and better.
Yeah.
And now coming back to it tonight, it's completely changed for the better. I mean, this did not taste like this last night. It's crazy how much it got into like a whole breakfast in the glass type thing.
Yeah,
So,
and maybe I'll get that. I'm still getting a lot of those kind of burnt sugars and all that, and maybe mine will get more of that as it opens
definitely
up.
will. Yeah, definitely will. That's all I was getting last night. I was getting like the burnt sugars, and I was getting a lot of the rye. The rye spice was in there. I'm like, man, where's that toast? And then all of a sudden today, it's like, here's the toast.
Mm-hmm.
So all right. So two really interesting things. One, when you pull barrel samples, they it's almost like where you pull the sample from. If you imagine the barrel with liquid in it, the liquid isn't in this like perfectly homeostasis place, right? So like where you pull the samples from, the whiskey, once you put it into tote before you put it in glass, actually starts to level out. And then the really interesting thing is there are two ways of bottling. One is a vacuum where you really get no air that gets into the liquid as you're bottling it. And one, you're actually kind of sucking some air through as you're bottling it. And honestly, like the bottling facility we use has both styles. And it's really interesting because sometimes when we open these bottles, we 100% find that they get better immediately after opening, like an hour later, 2 hours later. And sometimes it's like, oh, cool, this is exactly what we expected. And that's across so many. It's funny to come at this from somebody who was such an enthusiast and such a, like, I was selling whiskey at the retail level to switching over to producing and being like, oh, this explains so many different times where I've opened a bottle and been like, why is it that this one, when I open it, is so much more delicious after an hour, and this one, it's no different, right? It's like, it's very interesting how that happens.
Yeah, I mean, I can see just as it kind of continues to open up, and I just wanted to pour a little bit more in there, but it's starting to get a little bit more like kind of doughy or pastry, and maybe that's kind of the sweetness part of like, I always think of like a whiskey when it has those like pastry characteristics of it being, viscous and oily. There's just something about that richness that I love when I get like a pastry note on a whiskey.
Do you have a good pancake house near you? Somewhere that does pancakes really well?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I wouldn't say I frequent it all that often. My wife makes great pancakes, so I don't really have to. But
all right, I don't know about you, but like mine's this little place called Moonakis on the Cape. It's my favorite place in the world. It's where I had breakfast on my wedding day. And they get this like creamy butter that they put on the pancakes. It's like you get it when you go to a pancake house. I've never bought it before. I don't know if you can buy it, but this has that note, which is why it reminds me. So it has the sort of battery, fluffy, delicious pancake note, but it also has that little bit of like fresh, bright, like I made this cream yesterday effect to it that I am absolutely obsessed with.
Yeah, it's got a lot of layers. I mean, I'm really looking forward to this bottle kind of just opening up and going back to it. I mean, I think that's pretty consistent with your stuff anyway in general. It's just allowing some time, to maybe not be overly judgmental about it like right out of the gate, because I mean, it's probably gonna change,
God, it's such a cinnamon bomb to me right now. It's like drinking cinnamon Red Hots and pancakes.
You could just put like a Cinnabon sticker on this thing.
Basically, if we could. But actually, one quick detail we didn't want to mention. I don't know, Scott, do you remember what we chose here for? So a cool thing that Found North does with the tags is on the other side, you could put a latitude, longitude on the bottle, and that could be unique to wherever you want that to be, whether it be at a distillery, whether it be at someone that a place that reminds you of something. So the latitude, longitude that Scott and I picked was actually Bardstown, because it was the site that we did our first ever barrel pick in person, which was at Lux Row.
Yep.
So we did that first ever barrel pick in person. That was last year, very, very beginning of last year. And that's kind of like so this was kind of like, okay, well, that's where we started. And look where we are now, going north with all these barrel picks and the success of the group and everybody that supported us. So I thought that was a cool detail.
It was cool. It was kind of like you can put like a song. If you could like have like a scratch and sniff song, it could be like we started from the bottom. Now we're here. But no, I thought that was a pretty cool. Like when you were asking about that, like where was kind of like a like a special kind of place. It was pretty cool. Like, I mean, when you literally look at this and the latitude and longitude, which I'm familiar with because our addresses in a lot of areas in Wisconsin are, N's and W's. So we're all latitude and longitude and all of that. I mean, I don't mind people sending me whiskey, just no missiles, because it's coming for me. So none of that crazy stuff. But no, that was a cool little twist, I think. So
yeah, we did what we did was we took your latitude, longitude, and we did, I think ends up being the declination of true north is actually, it's like the compass measurement to true north. So basically Sammy who's on our team was the one who was all about this Easter egg. And I love the concept because like we don't say it, and maybe we should, but there's this concept of like discovering north, or like finding north, or found north, right?
Right.
It happens to be in the title. But we like that idea of the double entendre of, obviously we found this whiskey north, but also kind of like finding true north, which I loved your guys. Some people were just like, yeah, just use our store, right? It's like, all right, cool. Yeah, great. But you guys actually had a nice little story behind it, and I love that aspect.
Oh man,
I see some questions in here. Should I answer any of these?
Yeah, absolutely. Fire away. Yeah, fire away.
So Peter White said, "Is there any chance you get releases in Alberta?" One of the very weird things about us, we get a lot of requests for our whiskey to be in Canada, which it's from Canada.
I mean, it would make sense.
It would make sense, but you would think it would make sense. But honestly, like we have all our licensing here, so we have to get the licensing to import it, bottle it, do all that. We don't have the licensing in Canada to then import it back into Canada, which we would have to do. It's a huge pain in the ass. So we haven't done that yet. But it's in the pipeline. It's in the works.
It can leave, and then they're like, no Canadian whiskey for you.
Yeah, no, we've had some hilarious messages from people being like, this really, I can't buy this in Canada. It's like, you can't buy it in Canada. I'm sorry.
This is like morning cigar whiskey.
Oh, I've said before, I'm like, this is like it's like a great like cigar whiskey, no doubt. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to pick up like a little more of the citrusy notes and stuff on it as it opens up, kind of, for me.
I get that as the green apple that Jason mentioned earlier, or my like our Christmas dessert is apple crisp.
Oh
My
yeah,
grandmother made it. My mom makes it. My wife makes it. Like, um, it's totally a thing in our family. I get the apple crisp, like that apple with the almost caramelized,
yeah,
the cinnamon with the almost caramelized apple, right? Like it's been cooked, it's been baked. So it
yeah.
starts to get that guayaco, that kind of like savory apple note. Good God.
I can see that.
And green
Yeah.
apple, by the way, for me, gives that citrus, that kind of almost slightly a hint of sort of sour, a
Oh,
hint of
I'll,
like
I'll
apple
say that.
dark
I'll say
shit.
this. I'll say this. Whatever you do, don't ever refer to an apple as a citrus. People will lose their goddamn minds. I mentioned once.
Really?
I mentioned once in a video that this was very citrusy. And it was like it was like an apple. It was very citrus. The most comments I ever got on the one video was an apple's not a citrus. I'm like, you son of a bitch. I'm like, just
Okay.
look. I'm like, okay, guys, I get it. Like, wasn't really what I was trying to kind of get at. I was just trying to give a general reference. But anyway, I don't want
Well,
to.
listen,
Scott, can
I
I
mean,
come to your defense?
yeah, I think what people get mixed up, or why you say citrus, because apples and pears, there is some acidity that they have in
Yeah,
their
yeah,
in the fruit. So
like,
there is some acidity there.
yeah,
That's why when you cut an apple open, it turns brown. You know, that
yeah.
acid hits the oxygen and then it starts turning brown, and
Right.
that's what happens. So I think,
Thank you, Jason,
Okay,
for
you beat
making
me
my
to the
point. Thank
punch.
you. I
That's
appreciate that.
100% right.
yeah,
Like,
You know,
when you
yeah.
think when you think acid, you tend to think citrus. So it might not be completely correct, but I could see why an apple would come off as maybe a citrus to some people.
yeah.
Just a
I
little just a little science to you get it all here. I'm just saying. It's a little science.
You get it
when
all.
when I
Yeah.
when
Yeah, we're
when
not.
I was
We're not all just good looks. I mean, there's some science behind what we got going on here too. So
I used to when I first started tasting, like I literally when I was like 22 years old, I bought my first whiskey book, and I'm looking at these tasting notes, and I'm going, "What the hell? I don't even know what this thing is, let alone how to identify it in whiskey." I started thinking of whiskey as like the flavors of whiskey as being on a scale, and when I thought of fruit notes, I used to think of the sweet sour scale, right? Like
mm,
your really sweet flavors are your berry fruits that
yeah,
unless they're underripe, don't have very much sour. They don't have very much of the sort of sour notes. And your big bright citrus being, your lemon, your clementine, your oranges as
yeah,
being kind of way on the sour scale, right? And right smack dab in the middle was green apple because it 100% has a sour character to it. And
yeah.
anybody who doesn't think that hasn't had a Granny Smith apple. What the hell?
Yeah. Yeah, that was I mean, that was really kind of what I was getting at. See, you can see like William hates us. Acidic, yes. Citrus, no.
Well, no, he's right though. It's not
He
considered
is.
citrus, but it
He
is
is.
acidic. Yeah.
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 It's I don't know. Apple should be citrus, but whatever. I'm gonna leave that one alone. So
Scott,
yeah,
you just
we're not hey, we're not
can't
going down. I've already gone down this rabbit hole. So but whatever. Yeah, see, JG's got it. Ham hock is citrus. Yes,
Yeah.
it is. But anyway, so back to
So
the
Nick,
beautiful.
Nick,
Back to the beautiful.
so Nick, what are you guys working on next, man? What's in the pipeline?
Yeah, what do you got
Oh
going?
shit. Yeah. So I mean we just sort of finished selling the Found North season 1 single barrels. Your guys are coming up. We're gonna have a few more that come out at different places. One fun thing about these that I always like is this is the first time we've used squat bottles, and we're only going to use them for single barrels. So if you ever see a Found North squatty, you immediately know it's a single barrel, which is kind of fun. And so we released 5 and 6. We released the single barrels. I literally today was tasting through potential blends for season 2 for the next set of single barrels. Obviously that's down the road, but we're gonna start sicking it into new barrels once we've kind of settled on a final blend. So that'll be really fun. And then we had we had two things that we thought would make a great holiday release, and we don't feel like either of them are 100% ready. So we're going to be the weirdos who release stuff in like January and February, which I kind of think is fun, to be honest, because everything comes out in September, October,
Right.
November,
Yeah.
everything. And then there's this like everybody still wants it. It's just Scott, you and I we're talking on about how February is like the best month to drink because it's
Yeah.
still miserable. I don't, you're in Wisconsin, I'm in Massachusetts, so like it's miserable out, and
Yeah.
you want something you, you want something to do.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of special releases that will come out in the new year, which will be really exciting. Really, we've been working on a really old rye. We've been working on a sherry butt finished single cast that's absolutely delicious. And then of course we'll move right on to 7 and 8 batches, 7 and 8.
Awesome. I'm trying some of your number one single barrel. I can see this is probably much more approachable. It's easier to drink because when you go to this, like my impression, I mean, like this is oaky, dark, heavy, rich. And for me, maybe it's just coming off of this too, like on my palate, but
I honestly, I think your guys' barrel is just as drinkable, if not more drinkable. I think that single barrel one was a little bit more one note. It was a little bit more just like marshmallow in a glass, and it was awesome and it's exquisite. I love it. But that was part of the reason we picked it, was because it was so distinctive and so easy to identify. You buy it, you drink it, you get the marshmallow, you get the toasted marshmallow. I find your guys' barrel to be unbelievably balanced, but also really, really dynamic. I think it's really dynamic.
I think that's why Scott and I picked that one, because it wasn't just marshmallow and normal toasted notes that you got.
Yeah.
That's why we liked it so much, because everybody does marshmallow and shit on the toasted barrel. Like, who cares? It's nothing new anymore.
Yeah. I think we really found like that kind of, toasted oak, whatever, double oak, triple oak, 5 times oak, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it is just rich, complex, lots of layers. And I think the nice part about this is that I think as it opens up a little bit more, you start to pull out like a few little kind of nuances of the whiskey.
Yeah, the breakfasty qualities to this cannot be understated for me. It's really good.
Well,
it's going through shared pour again, Tim.
Yeah, through shared pour. So,
when you guys,
Nick, do you remember how many bottles there were of this pick roundabout?
200 and change, and that changes a few pennies. I think it was like 204 or something like that.
Nice. Okay, so a good amount for the patrons.
Yeah, and it's as much as I want to say that it's similar, it's different because just the process of everything is much different, more unique. I mean, I think it offers up a much different experience than a lot of us are kind of used to when you kind of think of it, from that standpoint. I mean, it is, the amount of like kind of handcrafted, whiskey that's kind of gone into this. I mean, man, you guys have touched this a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, yep. We're excited about it. What was the what's the proof on this?
115.8.
Yeah, 115.8.
Yeah. I got to tell you, that's my sweet spot. I know there's a huge hazmat movement in the industry, but if I get something at 130, I put enough water in it to bring it down to 115. It's really where I love my whiskey.
I don't think people like hazmat as much as they say they do.
Interesting.
You know why people like hazmat? Because it's easy to flip.
Well, it's easy. I mean, when you're drinking 140 plus proof whiskey, I mean, I don't care how experienced you are, that is lighting up your palate, period. Like that is doing a number on it. Like you can't drink much of that.
I put a little water in so batch 6 came out at 128 and change, and I put water in. I always do. I put a splash in, not a lot, but I think it opens up dramatically. I know someone's drinking it in the chat right now. Like, go get a teaspoon of water. Let's see what happens. Also, I just want to shout out Will Harvey here, Ice Fishing Whiskey. That's I don't know if you're doing that on purpose, but we sent out a really funny holiday email where we described basically like the optimal conditions and temperature for drinking each of our whiskeys. We're kind of leaning into being more of a whiskey that's made for winter conditions. And one of the whiskeys we quoted was ice fishing whiskey. Was batch 4. We said it's ice fishing whiskey. If that's what you were going for, Will, please let me know, because I that's a great tip of the hat.
Yeah, I mean,
it won't be much longer before we have ice fishing whiskey, or ice fishing conditions that require ice fishing whiskey. So
yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what to. I mean, this thing just keeps bringing all the spice, and the finish on this goes on for days.
Yeah,
that's my favorite part of it. You guys know we always talk about a good finish on whiskeys, and this one does it. But man, it's gotten sweeter. The oak is there, the spice is there, and it's not a typical toasted product, which is I think what Scott and I were looking for.
That's kind of it in a nutshell. Like kind of in addition to those pastry notes, you get kind of a little bit of that. I'll say even like maybe like a burnt toast. There's a little bit of that char, doughy, kind of bready notes. And it's got so much going on that it's kind of, honestly, it's kind of a hard whiskey to try to like convey like what it is. There's so much kind of going on that it's just one of those things that you need to try to kind of get the full experience of that.
Have you guys ever heard of tonka beans?
Yeah.
Tonka beans?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the guys on our team is obsessed with tonka beans. He bakes, he does everything. He cooks with tonka beans all the time. I didn't, he used to give these notes. I didn't know what the hell tonka beans were. It was like when I was first getting into Scotch, I didn't know what marzipan was. And everyone describes every sherry whiskey as having marzipan. I was like, what is marzipan? And so finally, when I got married, he actually, his wedding gift to me was tonka beans, so I could actually see what the hell they were. This actually has the tonka beans, and if anybody's wondering, it's like intensified vanilla. It's almost like oak, like a little bit of an oaky vanilla flavor to it. I was thinking if you could burn vanilla, which like when we think of vanilla, I always think of Haagen-Dazs, right? You always think of ice cream, but if you could actually burn vanilla and give it a slightly more savory note, that's what I think of tonka beans, and that's exactly what I'm getting on this now that I've let it open up for an hour.
Yeah, every time I go back to it, it changes a little bit. I get more vanilla. I am starting to see, Scott, where you were saying a little bit of the citrus come out. From the rye, but it's still keeping like that maple syrup pancake thing.
I can totally see that.
The cinnamon in this thing is just, I love cinnamon and whiskey. This is this sucks. I'm gonna go through this fast. I'm gonna have to.
Yeah, and it's good because well, I would say like that cinnamon note, like the kind of definitive part of it is like a really nice like cinnamon, not like a fireball like shitty cinnamon, like a really nice cooking cinnamon.
Yeah, like Scott, does this, like going back to it, do you get that Amburana vibe I was talking about a little bit?
You know what? I see what you're saying. Like what I tend to get with the like Amburana is like more like heavier, like sweetness. I'm getting that, but I can see the comparison, like how you've got, and I think it's probably that double oak, triple oak, whatever. I mean, it's that barrel influence that's really kind of coming out in this thing. That's creating that.
So did I miss this part? How many barrels was this in, Nick?
It wasn't in that many barrels. Different components of it were in different barrels. But
the components, I'm adding them all up.
Scott's quadruple oaking this.
the quintuple oak single.
I'm adding them all up along the way. So how many ever barrels they touch, that's what I'm gonna call it. So, but no, it's a great. But I can see it's got, like Jason had mentioned before. I mean that, the cinnamon roll, all of that. The baking spice, the sweetness. Those kind of like chocolatey, s'moresy kind of maple. It's got so much going on that you could spend a lot of time just nosing the thing, trying to figure out what it's all about.
So I found that one like if you want to get really really geeky about whiskey, your sense of smell goes like right into your amygdala. It's one of the reasons why smell can be so nostalgic, is because it really hits this like very primitive part of your brain. And for me, like when I was a kid, I mean like a little kid, like 4 years old, my grandmother used to take like white bread, toast it, like, Wonder Bread, toast it,
Mhm.
lather it in butter, and then she used to put half cinnamon, half sugar. She put this
Oh
this
yeah.
like cinnamon sugar combo and put it right on top of it. And for me, like the best tasting whiskey tastes exactly like that. It's like it
Mm.
immediately hits this emotional trigger that just gets me going. And just every time you keep saying like the cinnamon, I love cinnamon whiskey. I'm like, I literally the moment there's cinnamon whiskey, I like the whiskey, which may
Yeah.
be why I'm so obsessed with this single barrel.
Yeah, the apple crisp like cinnamon roll is like a perfect representation of this whiskey. Yeah, with
Yeah,
nice spice.
it really is. It's so good. I mean, it really is a perfect whiskey for this time of year. And I think anyone that anybody that missed out on any of our patrons that maybe missed out on the four gates because either the availability or the price was too high, this will be a nice one to get into instead of that bottle, because I think it brings some of that, maybe without the age to it, but the sweetness and the complexity that you're getting in this is definitely there. So yes,
Friday, Tim.
this Friday we're releasing it,
Yeah.
so you guys won't have to wait very long.
No, so
Oh,
so anybody who asks for tasting notes, I'm just going to forward this link to you. You can watch an hour of this, and you can get a good idea of what the tasting notes are going to be on.
Yeah,
this.
and the best part is it's one friggin' bottle, so nobody has to ask us which one should I buy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's kind of nice. So you don't get like, when is this going to be released, and what are the tasting notes, and how much is it?
Yeah, which one should I buy? Who's it going to be through?
Yeah, we get a lot of questions,
Love
but
it.
anyway, all right. Well, I guess, hey, Nick, I guess why don't you, I can let everybody kind of know maybe where they can find you, kind of what else you got going on, and we'll wrap her up for the evening.
Hey, the honestly, the thing I care the most about is that people get their hands on the single barrel. So make sure you're teed up on Friday and get a bottle of this. If you're interested in what we do, and we do special releases, I swear to God, this was like a nanometer away from being a special release of Found North. We release those all through our mailing list, which you can sign up for on our homepage, at the bottom of our homepage, foundnorthwhisky.com. And hopefully you guys will be so excited about this that you are chomping at the bit for season 2, because season 2 is in the works, and I'm pretty excited about it.
I mean, Scott and I got to taste some of the finishes that you guys are working on. We thought they weren't quite there yet. How have those been aging? Are they getting better?
Honestly,
or
I
were those...
agree with you. A bunch of those we bottled 2 months later. And you guys were tasting in summer. It's amazing how different the aging process is summer versus winter months, particularly in a place like New Hampshire. When the heat goes up, the barrel extraction goes through the roof. And not only the barrel extraction, but the chemical interaction. Things are more reactive the hotter it is, not just like pulling from the wood, not just this whole like, I don't know, this whole the barrel squeezes the liquid bullshit. Like that's not really what's going on. Like actually it's just that there's higher temperatures, so it's much more reactive. So that really made a huge difference. And they've come out well. The fun thing about this program was really being able to decide when to bottle things and allowing the customer to decide when to bottle things. I think you guys picked the right barrel at the right time. That being said, when you guys are in Boston next, come over. I'll taste you through all of the final products, all 18 of them. You'll have to stay for 3 days, but we can get that.
Yeah, Nick, I'm actually going to be in Boston for work a lot next year, because we're doing a big convention there at the Boston Convention Center. So
I love the Boston, but
if I ever get some extra time, I'll definitely let you know.
Yeah, seriously, hit me up, because we'll taste through some of the final products. They're pretty fun to do side by side. Cool. I'm waiting for somebody. Somebody is going to figure it out. Somebody is going to find every bottle of season 1. I believe that the only full set ever will be in my house, but we'll see if that's true. We'll see if somebody one day posts and says, "I found them."
That
right?
that number, well, I'll going back, like that number 1, I think it was number 1. And was it 1 and 4 that were slightly similar, but like 4 was an amped up number 1? Is that the way it was?
With the batches?
No, just, yeah, they're batches.
Of whose batches? My batches?
Yeah,
Batch 2
yours.
and 4 were similar.
Oh, that's what it was. 2 and 4. Okay. All right. Man, those were damn good. Man, if you
So
could.
Nick, how many?
Have you
How
had
many?
6 yet?
Nick, how many barrels were in the season 1? How many barrels made it out there?
Good question. Yeah, so there were 18 single barrels, but one of them we didn't sell. One of them,
Okay.
not it. Honestly, it was just too straightforward. Like we often are looking for something to have all these different phases of the whiskey. It was great on one end and just flat on the other. And so we're going to use it in a blend. My guess is will end up being 16 releases. Somebody did a 2-barrel combination. So that'll be really fun.
So you hear, guys, only one of 16 barrels, limited edition.
This is
yeah, we're putting LE. Like, you guys don't see it, but there's a little LE on this.
Little LE on
it. Honestly, like that was the intention of the whole program. That like when we release the next season, it won't be the same formula. It'll be completely different whiskey. So like, and on top of it, we didn't just take a batch of the shit we normally make and pull a barrel out of it and sell it to you. Like, this is a very one-of-a-kind whiskey. That was kind of what we were going for. What the hell is the point of buying a single barrel of something that I can go buy on the shelf cheaper that tastes just like it? The idea was like, these are very one of one. So I'm pretty excited for all of the Mash and Journey folks who are going to have this.
Well, this was always like the idea was like, I mean, we do a lot of hustling to try to find different unique whiskeys that a lot of other people aren't doing. And clearly you guys fall into that category of being able to, share an incredible whiskey that not a lot of people either unfortunately may know about or have an opportunity to try. But, a lot of people rely on what Jason and I say about things, and to get or have an opportunity to share a whiskey like this with people is kind of rewarding, because like you said, there's not many people who are going to have access to these single barrels and obviously this release itself, so it's one of the things that I'm kind of pretty proud about as far as what it is that we try to do for everybody part of the whiskey club. So
my favorite thing, I like, if you ask me what's the goal for a single barrel you sell, my goal for a single barrel I sell is for people to open it, drink it, and then regret that they drank it so fast. That's my number. Like that is literally the sign that we nailed it. It's that sense of like, wow, this was a one of a kind whiskey. I loved it. Shit. I wish I'd nursed this thing a little more.
Yeah, and just for all our patrons who were worried about it being a short barrel, again, there's a little over 200 bottles. I think we were at we had the pleasure of being able to pick a blend of a couple barrels that were then put in the secondary barrel.
Exactly.
So it wasn't, it was more of a chance for us to not get a short barrel than there was, because Scott and I love picking short barrels.
Well, and to that point, to that point, I know everyone clamors over all of the special releases and the big brands and stuff, but I mean, to ignore or walk past something like this that's different and unique that you're not going to have an opportunity to really get anywhere else. I mean, it's an opportunity that I love when the people buy them and they share their experiences with them. Like, we get a lot of great messages from people, and that's awesome to hear when people are really buying these whiskeys, based on like our recommendation or just the fact that we did the pick. So I hope a lot of people take advantage of this, because it's a badass whiskey. So
ironically, it was one of the shortest barrels. from our yields, you guys.
This is okay. In our life, this is not in our world. This is not short barrel. Like, we've had some that are like 36 bottles.
I think it was the lowest yield we got. I think it was the lowest yield we got. Most
well,
like
that doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't surprise me.
I was as soon as people were calling you out for short barrels, I was getting lightheaded. I was laughing so hard.
Well, we got news on one. We did a pick, and I won't mention who it was or anything last week or whatever, but we did one, and we got notification this morning. And I'm like, well, we're gonna need like we just were inquiring overall about a second barrel, and they're like, oh, that's good that you guys are doing, because the first one that you guys chose was a short barrel. I'm like, of course it was, of course it was. It's like, and we're quickly becoming like the Mash and Journey Short Barrel Club. It's just gonna be like. I don't even know.
It happens every time. Every 9 times out of 10, I feel like it's an 80% chance that when we pick a barrel, it's going to be a short barrel. But short barrels are delicious because
there's a reason why they're short.
There's a reason why we pick it. It's the most concentrated. It's the most it has the most viscosity usually. I mean, that's why we love them so much. We're not picking shit barrels just because there's more yield. I'm sorry, that's not how it works.
No. Well, that's like Nate kind of like nailed it. M&J excels at picking short barrels. Yes, we do.
We do.
Are you guys doing I see a couple questions here. Are you guys doing a 1 bottle limit?
Or I don't know yet. I don't know.
A 2 bottle. We did a 1 bottle limit on the first one, and then we found nobody was opening it. So I think on our next release, we're doing a 2 bottle limit. That's like a drink 1, bunker 1, right? Like put one away.
That might be a good approach with something like this. I mean, hey, let's call it what it is. I mean, we understand that, this is something that people are going to need to kind of like, hey, what are we kind of up against? What is this or whatever? So, I mean, I think this is a whiskey that is worth, when you open it and you give it a couple days and you sip through it, you're probably going to be one of those people that if you really appreciate what this is, you're going to want that second bottle of it. It's that good of a whiskey.
Yeah, we'll probably do a limit 2 on these. To get I don't remember, what was Nick, do you have a roundabout price point on these? I forgot what the price.
I thought he said $100 or so, around that.
At $90 or $100. Okay.
Yeah,
I think it's 100. Yeah. I think it's right at 100. Yeah.
So anyway, but. All right, guys. Thanks for joining. So coming this Friday, we'll be releasing our Found North pick. So hopefully you guys take advantage of this. Get yourself a couple bottles of some great Canadian whiskey, and you're not gonna regret it. This will be one that I'm really interested in hearing people's feedback, just because again it's slightly different, and it's just something I'm kind of excited to be able to share with you guys. I mean, we're both excited to do it. So look for this on Friday. Obviously, we'll be releasing to our tiers and doing all that. And anything else? Anybody else got anything to want to wrap things up with?
No, just tune in tomorrow night on Mash and Drum live stream tomorrow night. Blend-A-Get-In week number 8 with none other than Nancy the Nose Fraley is coming on live.
Oh.
We're getting to taste some of her latest blends, and guess who our guest judge is going to be? Nancy staying on to be a judge to judge some of these. Now, Kelsey Dime, Jeffrey Wack, and a couple of other well-known folks in the chat all have blends going head-to-head tomorrow. Nancy Fraley is going to be judging them, so it should be a really interesting night.
Man, it's like almost not quite the Super Bowl, but it could be the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's like, remember last year in the NFL when all like the AFC and NFC championship games were like the best games on the planet?
Yeah.
That could be tomorrow night before we get to the Super Bowl of the finals.
Well, there you go, guys. Tune in. Obviously, most of you are already going to do that anyway. But and then anybody looking for some Found North, they can always go to what's the website? Is it foundnorthwhiskey.com?
Nailed it.
Oh, there you go. Look at that.
Yeah, Nick, what batches are available on the site still right now if anyone wanted to look at and check it out?
You might be able to poach a bottle of batch 4. It's been pretty much gone. It's gone at wholesale, but some of the retail partners that we use for shipping have it. Batch 3, we have a little bit left, and we just launched 5 and 6. Although honestly, batch 5 is going is going pretty crazy. I honestly like. Did I send you guys 5 and 6?
No,
I have not seen 5 and 6 yet. Yeah.
Jesus. Okay. Yeah, I'll get those in the mail for you tomorrow. Batch 5 is batch 5's a weeder. We made a weeder. It's unreal.
Oh, interesting.
Oh shit, you made a weeder.
Yeah, it's batch
no wonder why it's selling well.
Batch 5, we've sold Batch 5, we've sold 80% of it in the first like 6 weeks that it's been released. Batch 5 is going crazy. And then batch 6 is the sequel to 4 and 2. It's actually a combination of the components of 4 and 2, just aged longer and then mixed in with a few other things.
It's a blend of 4 and 2 kind of.
It's a blend of 4 and 2.
Oh, come on.
It's heavier. It's like 4 and 2 plus buttered popcorn. Batch 6 is fucking ridiculous. Yeah. I am so sorry. I legitimately will get samples in the mail for you guys.
Maybe Jason and I can do a dual review. It'll be about an hour-long review by the time we get done dicking around.
Hey, we can do a live stream and we can go
a live review. Coming to you live.
No.
Guess what? I guess all these bottles were courtesy of a short barrel.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys, we'll wrap her up. Go check out Nick and foundnorthwhisky.com. Check out Jason tomorrow night with Blendageddon. A lot of good stuff going on. And then Friday, we'll be releasing this to all our patrons. So
look for a post tomorrow, guys, with some sexy bottle shots. And
Yep. And clearly, if anyone's ever wondering about like the sexy bottle shots, let's try that again. Sexy bottle shots. You know where they're all coming from. They're coming for me. On that note, everybody, hey, have a great night. We'll talk, everybody. Jason's drunk, and we're gonna wrap this thing up.
Just like all the stickers come from Scott too.
You got he's finally talking to the bed. So on that note, guys, have a good one. We'll get these bottles out to you guys on Friday. And Nick, thanks again for joining. We appreciate it.
Night, everybody.
Cheers.
Thanks, bud.